am. I am lost in the void. Nope, here I am. Hey, happy Tuesday. As I am recording this, I might have forgotten to set the promotional flag because either I reached out to Lakeside Games. I think I reached out to them as opposed to them reaching out to me about grabbing this. I'll put it so that in the recorded version. So they in other words, however I got it, I managed to and thanks to those guys at Lakeside Games for sending me a copy of this, which I shall display. Here we go. Try being over here today, which is Lavender Hack again, a Tolkien and other classic fantasy author inspired black hack based adventure. I think like I said, I think I forgot to put the promotional tag on there. I will, though, of course. I believe I asked for it. They were kind enough to send it to me, and they don't have any sort of controls over this. I mean, I'm doing this live, so what could they possibly control? There's no 7-second delay. As far as I know, I don't have any kind of go dead switch on my person, and I haven't looked at it until now, as is my usual formula. I look at this as we go along, live, as it were. So there it is. But it seemed when I saw their posting, I think it was on Reddit. I think they might have posted something, and I saw it. I said, "Oh, this seems really interesting." I dig me some Tolkien and some kind of classic fantasy adventure, so I really was interested in looking at it. And this is watered down homemade hibiscus tea for the working man in my PAX Unplugged metal mug. Ooh, let's get down to business. And hey, Krister and Perkins, welcome. So this is, I've got it on the dual view here. We can read this text here, right? Lavender Hack again is a tabletop role-playing game inspired by the classic works of fantasy luminaries like Lloyd Alexander, Terry Brooks, Robert Jordan, Ursula K. Le Guin, and J.R.R. Tolkien, using a modified version of David Black's brilliant black hack tailored for epic fantasy gaming. Lavender Hack again brings a fast-playing modern rule set to the kind of classic fantasy that inspired the earliest role-playing games. All right. Writing and layout by Leonard A. Pimentel. Artwork by Tanel Lovett. And some play testers. Great. Get a lot of inspiration, kind of an appendix N, of course. The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, The Castle of Lear, Taran Wanderer and the High King, the Shannara trilogy. The Shannara trilogy, I enjoyed it. I couldn't really remember a lot of it now. It really did feel, even at the time when I was writing it, even as a young person, it really did feel like this is kind of knockoff Tolkien. I mean, no disrespect to Terry Brooks, but I felt like I was kind of like, well, you've read The Lord of the Rings and you really enjoyed it. Here's something that's kind of similar to Lord of the Rings, slightly different enough. It was fine. Yeah, okay. The Wheel of Time was also a inspiration, which they mentioned before. We get that in their Appendix N, and Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series, particularly A Wizardiverse. And then we have some other games here that get noted: Barbarians of the Ruined Earth, Basic Fantasy Role Playing, Beyond the Wall, The Black Sword Hack, Classic Monsters, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of these. Man, there are just too many games and too much. Every time I turn around, someone's suggesting me or pointing out something I hadn't seen yet. We get over 100 pages, including the appendices. Start at the beginning, as has been usual lately. So back in the beginning, when I started doing these, I used to just kind of religiously just read through everything, and it's good. Maybe some people enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, but it takes a long time. Number one. And so I'd end up having to split things into parts, or I'd have these multiple hour mega streams. And I find that it's not always a good use of our time. So I have taken to more lately, especially since I'm trying to, when I can, stay within a 1 hour window, or maybe 2 hours if something's really big. And I've just been deciding to try to be a little bit more selective with what I decide to read. So I am going to be covering some stuff, skipping some stuff, briefly mentioning some things. If you're here in the chat, you're lucky because you can then send me a message saying, hey, go back and read that, or this is important, something else of that nature. If you're watching this afterwards and I missed something you felt was super important, sorry. I do my best, but as I am doing it all kind of live and off the cuff, I am possibly going to miss something. It is going to happen. Just got to roll with it. Perkins says they like Gene Wolfe's Dark World. I have not absolutely not read that either. Perkins also knows that Vance's Dying Earth is not listed, or several other fantasy authors. Well, they're probably not trying to be. I think there is in the back. There must extra material. I don't know if that's more Appendix N stuff, but of course they're mentioning their larger influences. I think just for the fact that we're playing D&D games, even if you didn't read them, Dying World is kind of right. It's almost Trojan in there, because if you're working off of systems that were working off of D&D in some way or form, magic wise, you're touching, even if you're not directly, Vance's works. Okay, so we got the intro. I'm going to skip concerning mechanics. I will read this one because we're going to probably be seeing a lot of mechanics. And it's been a long time since I've looked at the Black Hack, so my apologies if at sometimes I'm going to be not the most informed when it comes to how Black Hack in particular does things. Whenever a player character tries to perform a tricky action, they test one of their stats. To successfully test a stat, the player must roll its test value or more on a 20-sided die using the tests table below. All right, so as you go up levels, the tests get easier, but an interesting way of doing it, I guess, instead of adding your level or doing something like that, the starting value of the test gets easier. So you start at 24, you would subtract, let's say, your strength. You end up with a number. That's what you roll against. When you're at 9th level, you start at 21 and you subtract your strength. Is that a Black Hack Prime system? I guess maybe I just kind of forgotten about it, because it is an interesting way of doing it, as opposed to doing addition, which most folks find easier and a bit more intuitive than doing the subtraction. Perkins says failing forward is critical to read. All right, I will make sure to hit that one up. Rolling on a 1 is a critical failure. Rolling on 20 is a critical success. When testing a stat of 16 or more, rolling the stat on the die is also a critical success. Critical results are not relevant to every test. NPCs do not usually make tests. When NPC opponents attack characters or act against them, the characters test to avoid or resist their efforts. Foes may roll for damage, however. So all the rolls are player facing. Even when someone's doing something to a player character, the player character is going to roll. Got advantage and disadvantage. I think most everybody has at least heard of that by now. Just roll twice. If you have advantage, you take the better one. If you have disadvantage, you take the worse one. Powerful opponents. Tests are harder when acting against a powerful opponent. Okay. And especially for purposes of this, I'm not super interested in all the mechanical details. It's more to me that conceptually what we're talking about. We have opposed tests. We have extended tests. This would be kind of, I guess, akin to your skill challenge. Like here, the example is a protracted activity like a chase. We have group tests. We have search tests. This one's probably good to know. When characters search an area, they automatically find clues, concealed or secret doors, hidden compartments, and so on. The narrators may ask players to specify where they are searching to make sure they are looking in the right place, but players do not roll search tests unless the characters are in a hurry or the narrator needs to know who finds the thing first. This does not apply to hidden dangers like traps or foes waiting to spring an ambush. So if they search, they find. You can't ask them to be specific. Maybe you want to roll to see whose high die gets first crack at the whatever the thing is. But the only time when you have them roll is if they were in rushing, basically. So that means a key component of doing things is you want to find out, are you in a hurry or are you taking your time? Failing forward. Here's the one Perkins says is critical. Failing a test usually means the character fails to accomplish the action attempted, but not always. Narrators are free to decide that a failed test means the action succeeds with an unintended complication or consequence. For example, a character who fails a test to pick a lock might open the lock but ruin their lock picks. This decision always rests with the narrator. I think if you're going to use failing forward, which is not a bad idea at all, just in general, to get the consequences, to match the consequences, because you're going to be failing them forward, so they're going to be succeeding in some way, but there's a negative consequence. To tune in what that negative consequence would be, you want to establish before why the characters are doing the thing the way they're doing it. For example, picking a lock, sure, one thing is to ruin their lock picks, that's fine. But you might ask the player, why are they trying to pick the lock as opposed to bang it down? If the players say they're trying to be stealthy, then the failure might be the door opens, but they've made a lot of noise and they failed at being stealthy. Or if they say, so we can lock the door behind us, then in that case, maybe failing means they've ruined the lock and so it can't be locked. If they say they don't want to be discovered, then maybe the fact is they've opened it, but they've damaged the door, done something a certain way that it's obvious to anyone who looks at it that the lock's been picked, so on and so forth. Okay, we get how the dice notation We all know how dice work, most of us anyway. Perkins says, kill the beast, then it falls on you. I suppose it'd be one way, but I assume that maybe combat. We get into the combat subsystem rather than just I kill the beast. But yes, that would be definitely a failing forward in combat. Characters. All right, I just want to get the briefest of brief thing into characters, at least the kind of generic character stuff, because I'm really interested in how we're going to take this stuff and mold it for a particular, I want to say, high fantasy style campaign. I think those words I've mentioned before in different streams, I feel like the definitions of these words, these phrases have changed. Whereas I think people now, high fantasy is kind of high magic. But I always felt high fantasy, at least back in the day, back in my day, Pepperidge Farm remembers, high fantasy, I felt more referred to that there was some overarching large evil. You know, your Sauron, your Morgoth that's hovering over it. It's the party against this big kind of evil force that had sort of high heroism where you're saving the world, as opposed to something like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, that kind of fiction in which it's the characters are kind of vying against each other, but it's not really world ending. It may be the future of the Seven Kingdoms or something, but very rarely is it is the world at stake. Some kind of, they're not fighting against some kind of cataclysmic evil. All right, we've got our strength, dex, con, int, wiz, and charisma, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. I'm not worried about how we're rolling our stats. We've got this picks up which I guess I'm assuming is from the Black Hack as well, the 3rd edition style saving throws of fortitude, reflex, and will. We've got our fantasy species, humans, dwarves, elves, halflings. Now we have archetypes. There are 3 character archetypes: the brave, the cunning, and the wise. The brave are warriors, the cunning are specialists, and the wise are magicians. Each archetype includes 3 classes as shown in the classes table below. Review the classes and select yours. So if you want to be one of the brave, you could be a champion, a ranger, or a warrior. The cunning are divided into hunters, rogues, and sword masters. That's interesting. And then the wise are bards, druids, and wizards. So no clerics, if you will. Ryan Smith says fantasy levels equivalent to the morality. High epic / high fantasy is big good versus big evil. Brian Smith, yes, that was my understanding looking at kind of high fantasy. Yeah, high being that kind of high stakes, high honor, yeah, high morality. Yeah, that sort of thing. I don't remember there being people talking about low fantasy in as being the inverse of that, though. This is pre Game of Thrones, which to me is kind of the exemplar for kind of low fantasy, but maybe it would have been maybe more opposed to say something like Sword and Sorcery or kind of Conan, Far from the Grey Mouser, where folks are kind of just out for their own things, and also the threats are kind of tamped down. Like regardless of what happens in the Tower of the Elephant, it's not affecting the whole universe. It's just something happening to Conan and that guy, and that sort of thing. But I think now that when people say high fantasy, it's like they mean to say high, and then it's parenthetically magic fantasy. But maybe that's just in these particular circles, because it wasn't just about role-playing games. I remember this was kind of the discussions about just fantasy media, just novels and things like that, as opposed to now where I think it's maybe because I'm reading more or looking more in role-playing game circles, that's how it's defined here. But I don't know, it could have changed. It'd be something interesting to think about, look at some point. Fredrick says Game of Thrones started low and ended high. Yeah, kind of. Though I think I don't know if they really ever built up that kind of whatever the whole thing in the north, the White Walkers and things, is some kind of world ender. I mean, it was kind of continental, right? Were the walkers going to spread to Esteros if Westeros went all winter? I don't know. It never was really clear to me. But I never read the books. This is just from the TV show, and the TV show kind of fell apart towards the end. So maybe they just didn't. They did not build up things in the right way. Let's see. So what do we have here? The Wayfarer. The Wayfarer is an optional class for players who want to play ordinary folk, albeit with a spark of greatness, thrust into extraordinary situations. While this class does have its benefits, it is weaker than the heroic classes. Players should check with the narrator with one another before selecting this class, as it will not suit every game or style of play. I'm wondering whether the Wayfarer, if in this kind of Wayfarer, is a kind of a call out to, I guess, kind of a standard trope with a lot of fantasy stuff. Certainly Lord of the Rings, where you have some of the characters are just not as strong as the others. So if you're looking at the Fellowship of the Ring, as they're leaving Rivendell, you've got a bunch of hero types, or potentially really hero types: Boromir, Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and then you have 3 hobbits who are definitely a tier below them. And maybe you want to play out that kind of trope in your game. But then, when you're reading a book, it's one thing. When you're playing and you feel like, I've been reading through Fellowship again, and there's, they're getting to Caradhras where Moria is, and Aragorn and Boromir are grabbing hobbits and having to put them on their shoulders and run them around. It seems fine in the fiction, and it shows up how strong and how much endurance, even, Boromir, even who just can do this, running in the snow and the cold, and they're picking up these hobbits and trudging along with them and doing it without sweating, without falling over from exhaustion. But as a player, you might not want to do this. So it's a good call out to say, hey, you may want to play the kind of hobbit in being led around by Aragorn, but maybe the guy playing Aragorn doesn't want to be that. Maybe they wants to be one of a number and not that kind of, the protector or whatnot. So check in. Daniel Lambert says Frodo needs to be balanced with the Maiar. They're in the same party. Oh boy, yeah. That is where kind of the balancing thing, I think you end up with a situation where you just can't have that kind of game. Or I suppose you could, but then you have to have one person playing something like 10 levels above everybody else, and then is that fun for everyone? Maybe not. Yeah, but that's one of those things that it's hard to get in a role-playing game. Certainly. Perkins says, I tend to default to high fantasy, although I enjoy technology variability from Stone Age to Space Jam. I definitely think it is fun to mix that kind of tech throughout the ages. Daniel says, how will you possibly balance your encounters so everyone at your table is having fun with all equal? How indeed, Daniel, how indeed. We've also got faith. Heroes often accomplish great things because of their faith in themselves, their friends, and the promises of a better tomorrow. Elves begin every adventure with 2 faith. Men and dwarves begin every adventure with 3 faith, and halflings begin every adventure with 4 faith. As characters advance in level, their faith increases. Faith determines how well a character can resist despair, which we'll see to in adventuring. Additionally, players can spend 1 point of faith at any time to do the following: reroll a test or a roll, reroll a roll, reroll a test or roll, cast an expended spell, rid themselves of despair, gain an extra use of a special feature, recover a hit die of hit points and be revived if defeated, or attempt a nigh impossible feat of agility, endurance, might, or will. Faith is the purview of heroes. Characters who perform dishonorable or evil actions lose faith, and we'll see more about this later. Gaining adventures, okay, I'm not gonna get into the advancement, but we do get, let's see, so you can increase your stats. So your stats do, there is some luck involved, but your stats will potentially increase over time. And then we also get new boons, which we haven't read about yet, but we'll see about new boons as we go on. Hearth and home. In order to actually advance to a new level, characters must spend some time, typically a week to several months, in a sanctuary. Although the amount of time required is up to the narrator, the suggestion is 1 to 2 weeks to reach level 2, a month to reach level 3, and the season after that. All right, so basically you have your kind of, it's a type of retraining. The One Ring 2nd edition had this as well, which I really like, and I've been adapting for my own stuff. Is having, I always liked retraining because I think it forces you to slow down. It allows the world to sort of turn and events to develop, and you can't just speed from thing to thing to thing to thing. And I like that you have to be thoughtful about it. You can't just do it out in the woods. You got to go somewhere, to wherever, Rivendell or Hobbiton or Bree or whatever, some place, and be there for an extended period of time to do things. And so I kind of like that. It adds a choice. It's still the player's option of when to do it. They just have to choose when to do it and make that time investment, which means that they have to make a choice between letting things happen in the world, bad guys doing stuff, situations getting worse, get stronger, or try to get through that, roll the dice with being at the level you're at to get to the problems sooner, or some combination thereof. Archetype entries. Each entry includes a brief, okay, I get this. I don't need to get base hit points, hit dice, usable armor, attack damage, special features, classes, starting equipment. Fine. On to the brave. Daniel Lambert. Oh, you were referring to the other video. I got you. Actually, I was wondering if you were, but I didn't want to suggest. I don't want to double dip with my promotional. I don't want to promo my other video in this stream, though. You should go watch it because I think it is. I feel like I did a good job. I don't want to. I think it's a good message. How about I say that? Not necessarily that I delivered it in the best way possible, because I always watch my videos later and think, I missed this point, or I didn't make this point well enough, or whatnot. But I felt like the messaging is good. Fredrick Works says, we are only here for treasure. Yeah, well, you just got to put the treasure in the right spots then. You don't need to save the princess, but thankfully for you, the princess is sitting on the pile of treasure. So save the treasure, and just the princess will be freed, purely by coincidence. So then we're on to the brave. This is the archetype for warriors, heroic, stalwart, and strong of arm, who stand ready to face whatever evils the adversary may send their way. All right, so I'm really interested in. My cat is licking a receipt. Stop that, Bruce. So the one am I interested in? Attack damage, usable armor. I don't really care about those in this instance. I really want the special abilities, things that set them apart, the things that are sort of specific to this genre. So we have fell-handed or keen-eyed. The brave are fell-handed or keen-eyed. Pick one. Fell-handed deals +1 damage in melee, while keen-eyed deal +1 damage in ranged, and those bonuses increase. So you get to kind of pick whether you want to be a ranged specialist or a melee specialist. And I like that, and it's a very reasonable. It's a small advantage, but it is a good one. +1 damage is nice, not world-ending, but it is a nice one. And I think over time, it works. I really like those small. I feel like sticking to the kind of small bonuses are nice, because you can feel a little bit freer to give some of the stuff out or making them available when they're not massive increases. Multiple attacks. The brave can perform 2 attacks per round at level 3. Okay, great. So you get multi-attacks. And then warfare. The brave are schooled in warfare and have advantage on tests involving planning, execution, strategy, and tactics. Excellent. I'm not sure how I would use those, because I kind of like to leave that stuff up to the player. I think it's just a matter of, in this case, you want to be specific, at least playing the game the kind of I want to play. You want to be really specific when you get to make the roll, and not be, I need to plan on all my troops, make a roll. But when you get into the nitty gritty and maybe there's some question of this or that, or maybe I would even more, maybe if I was looking at somebody else's tactics and I wasn't trying to explain the whole thing, and they're saying, well, the king is showing me how he's going to array his armies. Do I see anything that matter with it? And that's maybe when I would roll, because I don't want to detail all the mechanics of what they're doing and have the player try to pick out what I think is wrong. But maybe just say, oh yeah, they're being really heavily weighted on the flanks, and if the enemy pounds their center hard enough, the whole thing could crash in on them like a house of cards. I might want to say something like that. Let's see. So we have the brave classes now: champion, ranger, and warrior. What's the difference between champion and warrior? So champions are heavily armored knights, heroes, and horse lords. Warriors are professional fighting men and women. So the champions do not get a penalty to their decks if they're wearing medium or heavy armor, and they get horsemanship for free. So you're knights, and the warriors are more like your soldiers. They get +1 bonus to all attack tests. They also get the doughty boon for free. We don't know what that boon is yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. And then we get starting equipment. I don't really care about that. Now on to the cunning. More practical, sometimes more practical than heroic, the cunning bring their wits and specialized skills to bear in the struggle against the adversary. They are, let's see, extra attacks. They get at level 6. Finesse fighters. When they're armed with light melee weapons, they may use their dex instead of their strength. Great. Mastery. They can reroll any test or roll once per game session with advantage after they reach level 6. And then they have advantage on stealth. Now we get the classes. Hunters. Hunters get DI. They do extra. They do more damage. They do D8 damage as opposed to DX or D3 for other cunning folks. I'm just to see the brave do D8. So they get to do basically the same damage as one of the brave if they're hunters. And they also get multiple attacks like hunters, like the brave. And they can make ranged sneak attacks. And they also get woodcraft for free. I do like that the classes here. So I kind of like these because they're really more subclasses in a sense. So we have the kind of the archetype, then these subclasses, and some subclasses are just a couple of just these extra kind of perks. The hunter seems really good. I guess what they don't get is they just don't get anything. If they can't wear heavier armor, so you're stuck with your light armor, essentially. But it seems like you get a lot of nice stuff. So if you want to be, I guess the idea here is if you want to be not a ranger. Well, rangers get woodcraft and they roll with advantage when fighting evil beings. The hunter, so the ranger, I guess it's more of the Aragorn style ranger, but so they get the woodcraft and then they get extra advantage when doing doing stuff. Hunters they're sort of the equal of the ranger when using ranged weapons, and they can do that sneak attack with ranged weapons. They also get woodcraft, but what they don't get is the heavy armor and things like that. So there's some overlap, which I actually appreciate. I enjoy that you can look at that playing that kind of character. I mean, if I wanted to play Aragorn, I would take the classic ranger, because Aragorn can put on heavier armor and do stuff like that. But I think you can look at that and think of, well, there are kind of a couple of ways to do this. If you want to go the cunning route, you're going to have these advantages, but you're not going to get these other things. If you take the brave route, you get some of that stuff and not the other one. But I think that they have enough different about them that they're not completely overlapping, because one of the things I don't like is one of the things I do like is a little bit of that niche protection. I don't like when there's complete overlap. When someone's saying, oh, you should never play the fighter of this type because doing a rogue and taking these things makes you, or bard or whatever, makes you a better fighter of this type than the fighter of that type. Like, I would never want that to be a thing. But I like that there are some different ways to skin a cat. That makes sense. Does that make sense? At the rogue, this includes burglars, explorers, and treasure hunters. They have advantage on tests that performing delicate tasks, like doing the kinds of stuff that burglars and explorers and treasure hunters do, and they get advantage when making reflex saves. Sword masters, these are your fencers and swashbucklers. If they're using a light blade, they get a little bit of a bonus to their attack and defense. They also deal damage like a brave, and they can perform multiple attacks like a brave. So if you want to be I don't know what would be maybe your Robin Hood type might be a sword master. I'm not sure. You could probably make a case of a bunch of different things what Robin Hood would be. Robin Hood's probably a bad place, because he's really good with the sword and really good with the bow. Some combination of the two. I suppose as a Robin Hood player, you just want to decide whether you want to be better with the sword, or be better with the bow, and stick with that. Now on to, and again, I'm skipping starting equipment because, it's whatever. It's cool. It's fine. Doesn't really matter too much in this grand scheme of things. Brian Smith says, a buckler of swashes. Indeed. Fredrick says there should be more bonus stuff for each level per the other hack games. I don't have the other hack games front of mind, Fredrick Gork, so I'll take your word for it. I don't know if there should be more. I think it's kind of the style of game. I think part of the thing here is that you're not getting over super powered quickly. I think they want you to level slowly. I think I'm guessing. I think I think the implication is, from what we've read so far, that the advancement's supposed to be a bit more measured there, and not be moving too far in kind of the, not want to say gonzo, but sort of high magic field. Remember, a lot of these influences are more kind of low magic, right? Or sometimes I wonder if Lord of the Rings is really low magic, or it's just kind of different magic. But in any case, there's not you're not getting a bunch of magic stuff up front. Perkins says Knave has a classless system. They've not read it or played Knave yet. Seems very flexible. I think it is. I should read. I don't think I've read it on the channel. Gosh, have I gotten to the point where I'm forgetting the stuff I've read on the channel? Is Knave the one that has where it's kind of what equipment you use is sort of what class you are, or what abilities you have? I haven't played it. I'm not totally down with it. I mean, that idea conceptually, I don't love it, but I should read it. If I haven't read on the channel yet and forgotten, I should do that. Yeah, I kind of like picking who you are, as opposed to picking your equipment that tells you who you are. I don't know. That's just me. I'm sure Knave, it's a very well thought of system, but that piece of it, again, on paper and the concept, I don't love. But I haven't played it, so it might work really well. And I think for certain situations, I can imagine a one-shot or something, it would work great, but I don't know if I'd want to play a campaign like that. Just to me. I kind of think of who my character's identity is, and then the story shapes that identity as you're going along, but they have this sort of core to them. I don't like the idea of that core is more or less somewhat based upon just what I pick up and hold in my hand. But that's me. But I also haven't played it. Okay, on to the wise. We get arcane lore. We get they get advantage on tests concerning about stuff about magic. They have detect magic. They can use they can test their wisdom as an action to detect the presence and relative power of magic beings, places, and items, including unseen spirits. I like that it's not only the presence, but also the relative power, which I like, just because it gives you a way to have somebody on the team that could potentially look at something and say, that is a demon of the ancient world, as opposed to, oh, it's just a kind of flamey, shadowy thing. And then resist magic, they get some advantage. The classes are underneath the wise are bards. They get to learn 2 bard spells per level, and they get the musician, rhyme, and verse boons for free. Druids study the subtle magic of nature. They get 2 druid spells per level. They can speak with ordinary animals at will. Ooh, I like that. And they have advantage on charisma tests for these interactions. They also get woodcraft. And then wizards, few in number. Wizards are true magicians. All current or former members of a once great order. They can learn 2 wizard spells per level. They carry a nearly unbreakable wizard staff, which is a symbol of membership in their ancient and venerable order. And as long as a wizard has their staff, they can apply advantage to a number of casting tests per day equal to their level. And then they get some starting equipment. Perkins says that Lavender Hack again has these groups of classes, which I like. It helps with portraying the character in game. Very useful for one-shots. Yep, I would agree. I would agree with that completely. They're hitting the main archetypes of this kinds of fiction if you want to play it. They're not super complicated. They just get you some extra perks. I really like this layout. I probably have to go back and read Black Hack Vanilla again, because I remembered vaguely this setup with the Brave, the Cunning, the Wise, but I do appreciate this, and I found some of my own ideas wandering in this sort of direction. So seeing it like, oh yeah, this has been done. This has been done and done well. I'm reminded of that, and I like that the classes are kind of underneath this. Just you start with this base, and then you add some different things. Notice there's nothing that's really taken away, so you get the base class and everything's added to it. I suppose you could get a situation where you want to make some classes that subtract something of the base to then add something, though maybe that's kind of part of the strength of the system is the bases are kind of at a level where, hey, if you're subtracting stuff, then maybe think about not using that base. Use something else if you don't need it. Fredrick Ork says Lavender Hack is like this, but it's all random die rolls except the initial character class. After that, you just roll dice. That's cool. I think for these kind of games, I think I like picking, I guess. I think it lends themselves, these kind of campaigns, I think, lend themselves to being a little bit more thoughtful about your choices, though I am always happy just to roll randomly, because you never know. I guess maybe I'd like to have the option, which you always do, because even if a system tells you to roll randomly, a GM can say just pick what you want. But I think I like having both options in front of me. If I don't have inspiration or it's a one shot, I can just roll. Or if I were starting a campaign, I get a chance to think about it. And then we have this finally, the Wayfarer. Level 6, they get extra attacks. They are fated. Wayfarers have advantage on fortitude saves to determine if they survive being defeated in combat. I think this is kind of like your Frodo class. We have a special, they're sort of ordinary, but they are something special. We need to get them somewhere, so we don't want to kill them off in a random encounter, so they get a little extra help there. They're hopeful. They get advantage when resisting despair. They're lucky. And they get a profession. And they have to pick one, but they get advantage in all tests related to that. On to boons. Boons are special abilities, skills, and talents. Men begin play with 3 boons, while all their races begin play with 2. This is in addition to any boons provided by archetype or class. Select your boons. Many boons are only available to specific races or classes, as noted in parentheses. So dwarves and elves get ancient enemies. They don't like orcs and their foul kin, so they get advantage on those. Men get, humans get ancient lineage. This is kind of like the men of Numenor. Their blood is almost spent. Perkins says, Ben Milton wants players to bring more to the table. I tend to play with random people, so having more brought by the hack game system seems better to me. I'm pointing out that Ben Milton is Knave. And Knave took inspiration from Macchiato Monsters. Yes. I mean, I think that you definitely have to tailor your approach to your table. If you're playing in a lot of gaming shops, public games, open tables, then you need to pick a system that's going to make that easy. If you're playing where I know that I have 3 or 4 players that are super hardcore, they're super into it, whatever, then you want to pick the system to match. In fact, those are actually really good things to think about. I don't think they get mentioned enough. Maybe there's another video in that about picking your system with those things in mind. I think we often pick our systems being very what's the word I'm looking for? Just being sort of optimistically, or kind of like we're picking it for an ideal situation. Oh, we could be like this, and I do this all the time. I'm certainly not above this kind of picking of systems. When maybe reality is we should look at and say, okay, what's the real deal here? I may have these lofty ambitions for the game, but the reality is I'm playing in this game store with 5 or 6 random people who are going to be showing up. Some of them repeat people, some of them new, some of this or that, right? So I need to pick a system that, from that kind of down and dirty, gritty management part, forgetting what kind of game we're playing, just from being able to manage and deal with that, I need to pick a system that's going to be best suited for that, and not pick something that, sure, if I have some kind of lofty goal, this is going to get me there, but the reality is not going to match up with the strengths of the system. Let's get to some more boons. We have Beast Kin. It's also for humans. They have a kinship with bears or wolves. Ooh, and can speak their language. I like that. They're born to the bulwark. They're courageous. They have courtesy. They're doughty. They're hardy and possess a wellspring of inner strength. You're kind of Sam Gamgee types. Dwarves can have dwarf magic. Elves can have elf magic. Halflings can be elusive. Humans can have elven heritage. You can be an excellent cook. You can be fair and wise. You can have fellowship, which belongs to halflings, bards, and wayfarers. They just have a warm and cheerful disposition that affects others. They can be hard as stone if they're a dwarf. They can have some form of healing ability. They can have horsemanship. They can have keen insight. They can have leadership. They can be a lore master. They can have martial training. They can be mighty or martial training if they're boards. If you're a bard, a druid, or a wizard. You can be mighty if you're a dwarf, an elf, or a human. You can be a musician. You can be nimble if you're an elf, a halfling, or a human. You can have an offhand parry. You can have a quick reaction. You could rally. You could have rhyme and verse. You could be a skin changer if you're a human. You can be skilled at skullduggery. You can be proficient in smoking if you're a dwarf, a halfling, or a human. You can know songs of yore. You can be steadfast. You can have steady hands if you're a dwarf. You can be a trader, a true speaker. You can be unbothered by the dead if you're an elf. You can be comfortable under the mountain if you're a dwarf. You can be underestimated if you're a halfling. You can sleep wakefully if you're an elf. You can be well-traveled. You can have winged allies. You can be a wolfhound, or you can have a wolfhound if you're a human. You can know woodcraft. You could be a world speaker if you're an elf. Ooh. Excuse me again. That's a nice list of boons. I'm sorry I didn't read through all the particulars, but hopefully you get the idea. Right, Smith, like the smoking proficiency. Good stuff. I mean, the nice thing is you can see, I think one of the cool things was why I like, D&D wants to be the system for everybody doing everything, and that's fine. That's great. But I like when you get these systems that are a little bit more focused, because you can see in those list of boons where they're pulling this out of the fiction. And I see the Tolkien inspiration more clearly than the others, because it's been, since I'm reading Fellowship right now, it's more fresh in my brain. But you can see where they're just really pulling out all this stuff from the kind of fiction that we're trying to create and putting it into those boons, which I think is really cool. I'm not that you can't do it in D&D, but D&D, you tend to have a phone book of everything under the sun. Whereas I think with something like this that knows, hey, we're trying to be a specific type of game, not the game for everyone doing everything, we can really hone in and create the kinds of things mechanically and conceptually that we want to see in the game. See. Brian Smith said, "Oh, yep, Nightbot. I didn't even notice that Nightbot caught the spammer. Nice job, Nightbot." Brian Smith says they took away the tip that you should find out what actions the system rewards the players for programming, and if that doesn't align with the game you want to run, keep looking. Oh yeah, that's really good advice, Brian Smith. Yes, you want to find out. That's definitely one of the key things. What is this game reward doing, and does that align with my players? Fredrick Orc has a group that all wants treasure. Then yeah, you want to find that game that is going to reward finding treasure then. Or if you want the party to not find treasure, then don't pick a system that rewards folks going after treasure. Excellent, excellent advice. All right, I'm going to skip over. We're at equipment. I'm going to skip it. I think, it's not super important to me in terms of what is really important about the system. So I'm going to skip. So sorry about that. Magic. Oh, let's see. So they have bard spells, druid spells, and wizard spells. I'm gonna probably breeze through this. Casters can catch each spell they know 3 times a day. The wise and only the wise may cast a spell more than this, but every casting after the third in the same day costs a point of faith unless the spell is cast as a ritual. So you're limited awareness. The wise and NPCs that can cast spells can sense when a spell is cast nearby. That's cool. You can counterspell. That's cool. That's a big moment in when they're in Moria. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that got skipped in the movies that is kind of overlooked. I think it's kind of a neat moment when Gandalf comes running back and says that, he tried to cast basically hold portal on the door, and then he felt the presence. He didn't know what it was at that moment, but he feels this presence on the other side that basically really breaks the spell, was going to break him. And it was the fact that literally the physical chamber could not bear the force of this counterspell, that this little battle between the Balrog and Gandalf on either side of this door destroyed the room, which is really kind of neat. And it's just a small moment in the books, but boy, I felt like it just opens up just all kinds of just really cool things about how magic works. Brian Smith says a Lord of the Rings system should have a magic sword name generator. It is. They should. And Perkins says it's good they cover encumbrance. Oh, should I look back at encumbrance really quick? Let's see. I'm just going to mention, yes, they do have it. They do have encumbrance. It seems to be pretty simple. Just limited to your items equal to your strength. But yes, they do cover it, which is good. You are correct. So get counterspelling, spell effects, minions. Some spells let casters control NPCs. NPCs under a character's magical control or influence are minions. And then players roll tests for their minions using a test value of 12 minus the minion's hit dice. Use a minion's full hit dice when applying the powerful opponent's rule to their test. Okay. So I'm not gonna go through all these spells. I'm just gonna get animal for bards, animal friendship, battle hymns. They get charm, which is nice. Clarion call, confuse, gesh. Right? I think that's how somebody said that's how you pronounce it, gesh and not gaius or whatever. I was mispronouncing it before. Basically, you can force someone to carry out an errand for you. Perkins says spellcasting systems are fun to try out. They really change how the game runs at the table. Oh yeah, absolutely. They get an Otto's Irresistible Dance kind of spell. Nice. And they get Words of Power. I always like druid spells. Also get Animal Friendship. They get Water Breathing. Elven Charm. Ooh, Elven Veil. Oh, they got a lot of these. They have all the elf-themed spells. Forest Barrier, Forest Shadow, Summon Fog, Tempest. Very cool. Wizard spells. Everyone gets Animal Friendship. I wonder if they could have saved a little space by putting in parenthetically, which ones everyone gets, and then maybe having a list. Doesn't matter. It's a small matter. I mean, I actually think it's nice that they just reprint the spells that everyone has in common. Because then if I'm playing a wizard character or if I'm running a game and someone wants to know about their wizard spells, I can hand it to them and they don't have to do a bunch of flipping back and forth. Trying to find the spell. Anything really cool? They also get Words of Power. Living Rope. Animates a coil of rope. Yeah, that's cool. All right. I don't see. I'm going to breeze through combat as well. Because it's not my main concern. I'm guessing it's going to be more or less hack or black hack. Fredrick Work says usage die is usually a very important thing in a hack system game. I don't think we've seen it come up yet, though. I did. If we go back up to equipment, do I see usage die stuff? No, I don't. I mean, I'm guessing it is here. Where do they? Nope, they want you to count. It seems like it. Or is that the usage die? I don't see usage die. I'm scanning it. I don't see usage die coming up as written. So I'm not sure. But they give you a number. It seems like maybe they want you to count it, which kind of makes sense in this kind of, I feel like in this kind of low magic driven kind of system, it seems to me that non-usage dice works better than usage dice thematically, at least in my brain. Yeah. Oh, back to the spell Gesh. Yeah. It's not geese. It's Gesh. I guess it's Gaelic or Irish Gaelic. So yeah, it's I've been told it's Gesh, and I did look it up, and I believe that is correct. It is Gesh. That's the fun thing when you read all kinds of stuff. I never encountered this word outside of role-playing games, and I have never really had to say it outside of whatever. And if you say like Gaius, people get, because I think so many people have mispronounced it, that in any Gaius, geese, whatever, they're gonna get what you're saying. So you never hear it really pronounced the correct way. So you never know until you're on stream and you say it, and somebody's kind enough to not just snicker at you, but correct you. And Krister confirming I have the correct pronunciation. So moving in distance, we get melee, closing, throwing, shooting, and viewing. I guess that's in from short to long range. Melee is about your 5 feet. Closing is within 30 feet. Throwing 60 feet. Shooting 120 feet. And viewing beyond 120 feet. Those are good distances. Foes hit dice indicate how many d8s are rolled to determine their hit points. Optionally, the narrator can simply assign weak foes 2 hit points per hit die, average foes 4, strong foes 6, and elite foes 8. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you pronounce Sturge? I guess I'm going to say it. Sturge. Yeah, I say Sturge. Is it pronounced some other way? I kind of hope it is now, that it's like Stiergay or something. Makes it sound more I don't know, exotic to me, to my American ears. I'm gonna kind of skip out here. We get all out attack, full defense. Damage is depending on the hit dice of the creature. We get crits. We can optionally use exploding damage. We get a two-handed fighting. And then armor, we have, I guess it's ablative armor. It reduces, damage is reduced by your armor's protection value, but you always take at least 1 point of damage. So you can't ever go down to 0. 0 damage. You can also take ongoing damage. Character who reaches 0 hit points is defeated and must make an immediate fortitude save. If the save succeeds, the defeated character is unconscious and out of the action for the rest of the fight. Once the battle is over and an ally revives the character, or they recover on their own, they roll a 1 hit die and heal that many hit points. If the save fails, the character is killed. If death is not an option at your table, the character may instead be severely injured and out of action for the rest of the adventure. Optionally, the character may remain in play but suffer disadvantage on all tests and rolls for the rest of the adventure. If a character is defeated a second time in the same adventure, they roll this fortitude save with disadvantage. If a character is defeated a third time in the same adventure, fortitude save is automatically failed. Unlike characters, foes just drop when they reach 0. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So you go down to 0, get a fort save. If you make your fort save, you're good, or you're good. You're unconscious. If not, you're dead. Though they give you some nice options here if you want to suspend death as an option, or at least maybe push it out further. But then you can only take so many. You can only get knocked down to 0 so many times, which is definitely implying that you don't want to fight a bunch in this kind of system, because you're only going to get, if you're running it the way they're basically having you do it, then the second time you get defeated, you're making disadvantage on that fortitude save, and the third time you just die. So that's a little bit of in some ways, more dangerous. And if you're playing in, I guess more dangerous than some games, right? Because it's more than if you just drop to 0 and you're dead. But the fact that counter ticks down. So okay, the first time you do it, you get that fort save. Second time with disadvantage means you can only run that play 3 times. Whereas a system would say negative hit points, is you can run that negative into negative hit points as many times as you want. So it's kind of an interesting mix between, yeah, you get a little bit more help than just your 0, you're dead. But over the course of an adventure, you only got 3 strikes and you're out. Which I think I like. Though it definitely means that I think as a player, don't get an adventure. They haven't really defined, I think, what an adventure means, if that's a session or whether that's, no, the adventure is we're playing, I don't know, get to Rivendell, and that makes 8 sessions that you have to get through, and then you only have that kind of 3 strikes rule. I'd be curious to know what they envision as being an adventure's worth of time in this sense. Brian Smith says, it makes my eye twitch. These categories of foes aren't organized from lesser to epic. And then Perkins says, oh, it's going to Sturges, that their dwarf encountered 3 Sturges during their solo adventure last night. The automatic 1d3 hit point drain is cruel. Oh, yes. Yeah, you definitely don't want to get involved with Sturges if you can help it. Oh, I see. And yes, on this, I hadn't looked at the other side of the page yet, Brian Smith, but yes, they cover epic foes first, then tremendous foes, and lesser foes. An epic foe is a foe that can pose a significant challenge to a group of characters all by itself. Epic foes have 6 hit points per hit die, times the number of characters in the party. So they are adding in a little bit of, we could call it, say, a story gamey element here. They are going to be bigger and nastier the more people you have. So they do scale a bit to the party. I'm not sure I love that part, but you can always skip it if you want to. They are also resistant to all spells and effects that would prevent them from acting. That's a good thing to point out. This is one of the things I feel like that 5th edition runs into a lot. You have some crazy singular beast monster, and then the party starts hitting them with effects where they're losing actions, they're losing things they can do, and then you see that action economy just roll over you, and just you get pounded to oblivion. So one way to take care of that, 5th edition tries to do it with things like legendary saves. This one's doing it with saying, yeah, you just have flat resistance. Epic foes deal full damage to beings with damage resistance or damage immunity. They also act twice per round, first after the characters win initiative, and then again after those who lose initiative. And then when they lose a third of their hit points, they automatically disengage for at least 1 round, and the characters recover 1 point of faith, which they can spend immediately. Once it renews its attacks, the epic foe begins rolling damage with advantage and will do so for the rest of the battle. It may gain other unique abilities as well. Oh, that's kind of cool. So when you knock it down to a third, you're going to get kind of 1 round where you can narrate how whatever it's doing. It's kind of it's a bit of your thing if you want to make this thing transform or go into a second power mode. But the characters get into what I like about this, and I've said in the past, I don't love the oh, it's transforming. We've got 3 stages to combat. I kind of don't like it, because it's something that, no matter how much damage, I could do 1 billion points of damage, and instead of just killing it and obliterating it like I want, it's going to just end of stage 1. And that's kind of, feels cheap to me. But I will say what appeals to me about this version of that is that, one, it's something that it can be player facing. This is an epic foe. We understand that. We know we're going to get this. And when we hit it, though, we get something back. I did that 1 billion points of damage and forced it to go from stage 1 to stage 2. I get something positive. It's not just about, oh, now you're getting to stage 2. It's okay, so this thing's going to go through its transformation or whatever it is it's doing. I get a point of faith that I can spend right now, so I can get some extra healing, and we get kind of advantage of this breather. It's not just this narrative GM moment where I describe the Transformer Decepticon transforming. There's actually something positive for the party comes out of that. Yep, Brian Smith, it's just built into them being epic. Perkins says, I like that they are including DM advice to run epic foes. Good stuff. Brian Smith says, only the baddest bosses get legendary resistances. I'd rather just not have to track them. Yeah, I think that I would just give them, I think I'm not currently running or playing 5th edition, so take this with a giant grain of salt. But when I've thought about monsters and the kind of epic monsters, I just feel like they get saves after every players, that at certain, my idea for epic monsters, feel free to steal this, is to have them have fixed initiatives. So for example, let's just say a dragon will have 4 initiatives, or say 20, 15, 10, and 5, and maybe 0. So 5 initiatives, or you could say 4 initiatives, right? 20, 15, 10, and 5. They're going to go in each one of those. And they get saves at every one of those. So sure, you can do your, it's confusing, whatever. You're at 24. Bard casts says something, and confuses the dragon. Great. But then not only does the dragon get the save then, but the dragon goes on 20, it gets to save. And that way, these truly epic monsters, sure, you can take away some of their actions, but you can't just immobilize and do everything for entire rounds. Or you're just gonna have to work, and multiple people are gonna have to do that. And then you could give, if you want something to be not quite so epic, maybe you give it just 3 initiatives, maybe just at 15 and 5, and then something else could have different ones. So you could scale up and down, but basically they get this many rounds for a party. And then you could limit on a given, or they get many turns in a round, and you can limit some abilities on turns. If you don't want maybe I don't want the dragon to be firing Dragon's Breath 4 times around because it has 4 turns, and just like once per round they can do something like that. That's kind of my not at all well thought out and tested take, but that's kind of where I land with it. Then once an epic foe loses 2/3 of its hit points, it's going to disengage again, so it gets another. Basically it goes through another transformation, and then it starts doing double damage, and will do that. I would maybe give them an option in here to kind of fly away, though I suppose you could use that. It disengages from combat. It could like vanish. So you could have something like run away, I suppose, or fly, or teleport. And that is so epic foes, though, is for the toughest of the tough. So dragons, giants, and large trolls and whatnot are not epic foes. They are tremendous foes. Their attacks are, and this means their attacks are too powerful to parry. Attacks from tremendous foes must be dodged rather than parried. So characters test dex instead of strength when defending. And then the dividing line between large foes and tremendous ones, we get up to the narrator. Lesser foes may fight as a mob. Nice. And then they just basically just mob you, which is cool. We have morale. That's great. We have some ways of doing healing, some mounted combat. Oh, we get some mass combat. Also nice. Because you might be somewhere like at the Battle of the Pelennor. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm glad that it's here. Just get some simple mass combat outings. Looks like they're using a D12 die to adjudicate this. And then some 2d6 table for battle results. Brian Smith says they like this categorization for a Dark Souls kind of vibe too. The giant that swings a huge sword and destroys buildings should not be rolling to hit. This is true. Well, I think they still have to roll to hit, right? I think they still might have to roll to hit, but you can't at the same time. Yeah, you're dodging. You're not parrying. You can't block the massive troll with its club. It's can you get out? It can get the heck out of its way. And then we have in the adventuring section, we get some stuff on random encounters. So this uses a real world timer, not a fictional timer. So every 30 minutes, you're rolling a d6 with basically a 33% chance of running into something random or randomly generating something they run into. We do get reactions on a 2d12 table. 2 is attack immediately. 12 is offer request assistance. And all kinds of stuff in between. We get falling damage, fire, languages, and luck. Luck is basically for the narrator, the referee, to roll if they need a random answer or outcome. On a d6 roll, 1 to 2 is bad for the characters, 3 to 4 is neutral, and 5 to 6 is good for them. Let's see. Brian Smith says it doesn't trigger just a dex save. I mean, everything is so. Brian Smith, all the rolls here are player facing, so the players are always rolling a save basically versus thing. So yeah, they are in essence rolling a dex save rather than strength. So by rolling a dex save, what we're saying is that this giant troll with its club, you're trying to dodge out of the way as opposed to try to parry it. I put my shield up. It's like it's too big. It can't. You're crushing your own arm. So it is in essence triggering a dex save, which you could certainly narrate as just something massive happening. It's kind of up to you and how you want to characterize it. But basically, the idea is that you can only dip, dodge, duck, roll out of the way as opposed to block it or do some other kind of martial maneuver. Perkins mentions the rules encyclopedia covering mass combat. Yes, it does. They would read that if they expected a mass combat might happen during a game session. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that. You can go back to chainmail or something also. It really depends on how you want to run your mass combat. I should probably read some of the stuff in the rules encyclopedia at some point. The mass combat system, I feel like in there, they're very much, you're going to come up with kind of a whole equation of dice, and you end up with something, you roll it, and you get some kind of outcome. It's not really meant to give you a tactical back and forth. It's kind of, at least my recollection of it is you really just need to get kind of the result of a combat. If you're looking for something more tactical, turn oriented, then you might want to find something else. Fredrick mentions that in Mystara, many countries are at war or on the verge of war, so mass combat might come up often. But you can also run mass combat kind of in the background as your party is just doing stuff. So you don't have to necessarily engage with mass combat mechanics if you don't want to. You do have some alternatives, though. I think mass combat is fun, especially if you have characters or players like me that kind of get into some of the tactical stuff, though I don't pretend to be very good at it. We get poisons, different kinds of poisons. Nice. Different kinds of traps and hazards. Also nice. I'm going to read it. We're going to read despair because I think that is impotent. Whenever sorrow and hopelessness threaten to overwhelm a character, they must make a successful will save or gain 1 point of despair. If a character's despair ever equals their starting faith, regardless of how much they've spent, they fall into despair and suffer a -3 penalty on all tests until their despair drops below this threshold. And then we will see how you can relieve despair. The following situations require a will save to avoid gaining despair. The narrator may require a save at other times as well. So you could maybe crossing tainted lands. You could face a dreadful foe. You could suffer a loss. You could suffer a major setback. You could witness hatred and evil. Perkins says, I like how this book, there on Hack Again, is narrative-based mechanics. Clearly, they have focused on streamlining. Yep, I think they have, but I think they've tried to cover, again, the stuff that really fits in with the type of fiction that they want to recreate, which I appreciate. Relieving despair. Characters normally rid themselves of all despair between adventures. The narrator can alter this when running a number of smaller adventures that occur with little to no time in between, but that should be rare. During an adventure, characters may rid themselves of despair by spending faith on a point-for-point basis by using a boon. See those boons, or as explained below. So things you could do, you can appreciate beauty or splendor, you can defeat a dreadful foe, you can enjoy camaraderie, or you can spend time in a sanctuary, but you might also be taken by a madness. If the opportunity presents itself in the game, a player whose character has fallen into despair may choose to have them be taken by a madness. This means the character acts dangerously out of character for at least one complete scene, and this must have some adverse impact on the character or their allies. The character might make unreasonable demands of their allies and threaten them if they do not get their way, attempt to throw their life away by assaulting a foe they cannot hope to defeat, or collapse to the ground weeping inconsolably. Or they may act out in some other way. Once the character returns to their senses, they lose D3 points of despair. This is your Thorn, Oakenshield going nutty for the Arkenstone kind of moment, or some other thing where somebody's taken and they run off, they do something. I like it because as Perkins was talking about, kind of narrative-based element, you are creating this kind of narrative thread, but it has a purpose, and I like that it's player-based. It's not me as a GM saying, okay, character, you're taken by madness, or taken by Abe madness, or taken by the musical group madness. You're picking to do this yourself because you've fallen in the hole with despair. So I like that a lot. Faith and despair are opposite sides of the same coin. Whenever a character has the opportunity to rid themselves of more despair than they have, even if they have no despair to begin with, the extra may be used to regain spent faith. In addition, any boon, condition, event, or situation that eliminates despair may also be used to recover spent faith, but despair must always be eliminated before despair can be recovered. And interesting here, they actually give an example, which they haven't given. That's one thing I haven't seen very much of, are examples. And I felt like everything's been pretty straightforward to the point where I don't feel like I've needed any, but I think examples are always good. Treasure Cork says something a ska concert breaks out. Yeah, pretty much. Faith and Villainy. This game is about heroes, whether born to the mantle or molded by circumstance. As such, anytime a character acts in a cruel, dishonorable, or greedy manner, they immediately lose 1 point of faith. For example, characters can lose faith, or characters lose faith if they murder a hapless or helpless victim, break an oath or vow, or regularly loot the bodies of their enemies for valuables. Because remember, this is not your loot for XP kind of game. This is not just the rich or die trying. You are literally a hero trying to do heroic things, and heroes don't do that. Presumably, unless they must for something, and then you can maybe deal with that separately. Like if you needed to get the key from the gatekeeper to get in to save somebody, and you have to take it off the body. That I would not put that as looting. Looting is, like they say here, for valuables. The key is a necessity. It's not just something to take for its own sake. The specific circumstances always matter. As such, the narrator should warn players when they are about to do something that will cause them to lose faith. Always a good idea. Journeys as outdoor adventures. As this game is firmly entrenched in stories about heroic journeys, both literal and figurative, the following rules can help make every journey part of the adventure rather than a mere prelude. I need to breeze over this because I'm already into overtime. All right, guides and maps. Characters got to know where to get there. Most characters can only reach well-known locations fairly close to their homes within a day or two. To travel further, they need to follow directions and clear landmarks or rely on a map. There's a boon that kind of helps with this if they need to. Sometimes adventure sites are well known, sometimes they're not. We get your travel speeds, 24 miles a day on foot on roads. If it's just ordinary terrain, I'm guessing, yeah, I think so. That's 18 miles a day, 12 miles a day on rough terrain, and 6 miles a day on brutal terrain. And then notice that mounted, you get more mileage on roads and then under ordinary circumstances, but not better than being on foot once you get into rough and brutal terrain. And then we have some river-based terrain, and then air, you're flying in an airliner, 120 to 360 miles. We have some travel tests for some mishaps that might be backtracking, becoming exhausted, getting lost, having a poor campsite, going slow, or being vulnerable. I'm going to kind of breeze through all these, but I think we get the idea of what they entail. Fredrick asks if you use the hack hex with this. Yet another black hack thing I don't know about. I'd have to look up the hack hex. Maybe I will, because that sounds right up my alley. Perkins asks if I've tracked group reputation or PC reputation over time. I have, but my current group has been up until now operating essentially out of a single place. So I really just had in mind what the reputation is here. I haven't really thought about or figured out how I want to handle when they travel, because I don't want there to be a global reputation. So maybe I think I need to come up with some kind of way I can systematically determine, I guess it would be the sort of reputation decay as you get further away from the places where you've done deeds, kind of thing. I need to think about it. But yeah, I think reputation is a good thing to track when you can. If your party is just bouncing all over the universe, it can be tough because they're moving so far away from things once they do them that maybe it doesn't make sense to. If your party's globe traveling everywhere, I don't know that even a reputation would matter unless they're going back to the same places over and over again. If it's a very linear sort of thing and they're going to be moving across the continent, and their deeds will probably never catch up to them. So then it doesn't matter. If your party is going to be going back over the same locations over and over again in terms of settlements, then I think you really want to engage with it, because you want the party, I think it's going to feel like a reward to them if they're assuming they're gaining a good reputation. If they're getting a bad one, then it becomes a consequence. But either way, it shows that kind of dynamic world as they're gaining and losing stature. But I don't have a great system that I use this system. I don't have one. So far, it's kind of ad hoc for me. We get terrain, perilous terrain, could be broken ground, a flooded ford, bogs, icy crossings, so on and so forth. This is just dangerous bits of terrain. And we have travel events. Oh, I like that they've broken them up into seasons, which I like. Could be nothing, could be an encounter, could be misfortune, might be a settlement, a curiosity, or a wonder. A curiosity could be anything from the mundane to the miraculous. Examples might include a domestic cow, goat, or sheep wandering far from any known settlement, a long abandoned cabin in the wilds, an ancient cairn, dolmen or menhir built by unknown hands, conclave of forest animals, predators and prey that disperse the instant the characters draw near, so on and so forth. A wonder is a place of natural beauty or work of splendor that can rid them of despair. So you kind of want to find a wonder if you got a lot of despair going on. It's good. Perkins says their PCs are being tracked by factions, and as they do things, they are earning both good and bad rep by faction. I think that's really good. The one thing Perkins is, at least for me, because as a player, that's something that annoys me. If the factions are learning of things that they have no business learning about, given what we've done. So, for example, if I kill, someone little Billy got lost in a deep well, and I go through a dungeon that's connected to the well, and at the bottom of the well, I find Billy, and there's nobody around, and I decide, Billy's not worth the trouble, and I knife him because I'm just an evil, dastardly character. I come out of the well, and suddenly all the factions know that I murdered Billy. That annoys the heck out of me. So I think always make sure that your factions have a reasonable way of determining what the party has done before you start ticking up and down their reputations. Just my 2 bits. Get a weather table. Again, I like it's broken down in seasons. You just roll a die and you get whether it's storming, raining, foggy, clear, or beautiful. And then we get some complications. Might get chased. You might have to escort somebody. You might be opposed. It's a race. Got to be stealthy, or you just have to survive. And we have effects for the cold, effects of fatigue, finding shelter, heat, hunger and thirst. Good note on hunting and foraging, mounts and pack animals, and then supplies. And now we get into adversaries. Dread. Certain foes are dreadful, meaning they cause dread. Characters must make a will save when they encounter such a foe. On a failed save, they gain a despair, and they suffer a -3 penalty. So if you find something that's dreadful, you got to be ready because it's going to be tough. And we get all kinds of, I am not going to go through these, but we just get all kinds of animals. Now we get some sort of more monstrous creatures, basilisks, dragons, fell hounds, horse of the elder days, lesser worms, ruined flyers, so on and so forth. Ooh, whites, demonic. What's that say? Demonic emissaries, demons of the elder days. Hint, hints on what that is. Withered necromancers, wraiths, soldiers, giants, and trolls. I like that they've got them their own category, including treants in there. Is treant? I thought that was I don't want the Tolkien estate coming after. Isn't that a Tolkien thing? I just know that, or no, maybe that's Ent. Sorry, Ent was Tolkien. Treant was TSR. D&D changing the name because of the Tolkien estate. Orcs, including goblins and such. Ooh, and then we get treasures. All kinds of wells and heirlooms, heirloom weapons, heirloom armor. So here we get kind of the magic weapons, magic armor of a sense. Weapons crafted by dwarves deal an extra point of damage to giants and trolls. Trolls, if they're crafted by elves, they deal an extra point of damage to orc kind and servants of the adversary. And if they're crafted by humans, they deal an extra point. Humans of the elder days, rather, they deal an extra point of damage to demons and the undead. And there's also armor with similar effects. I like that it's based on who created it. That's cool. You can have all kinds of different types of armor. Basically, your enchantments of armor, enchantments of weapons. We could also get maps, scrolls, and other writings. And then we have some just wondrous items such as elven ropes, cloaks, and boots. Bardic instruments, waybread, the finest pipeweed and all the farthings. Was it the 9 farthings? Something like that. And then we get some random, and we get some random stuff. Now we get some stuff about the world. I'm going to kind of skip this, but I like that they're giving you, hey, these are the kind of assumptions about the world that you're playing in. So heroic characters, it's kind of a fairy tale world. There's good and evil. They're not defining it, but you're in it. It's sort of a medieval setting. Magic is fantastical. And then we get to the appendix, all kinds of stuff. And we get some character sheets. And then we get the open, whatever the system, SRD system document. And there in Hack again, a Hobbit's adventure. We do not have a +1 sword tree. No, we do not. Fredrick. The elves grow weapons. They don't craft them with a hammer and anvil. Tell that to Elrond Smiths, who are shown clearly using an anvil in Lord of the Rings. So basically, my bottom line is I really think this is an excellent hack. Again, I'm not super expert on the black hack. but I really appreciate what Lakeside Games has done. At least on reading it, I kind of interested to play this if I could get around to doing any kind of one shots to try something with this. I think it really does an excellent job of bringing in the kind of fiction they're trying to create and matching that with the mechanics and things. I can easily see how you could take these to set up your kind of Lord of the Rings type game if that's what you're looking for, and run it. Now I haven't played it, so I can't say that, but I think that they, in terms of at least what I get from reading it, is I feel like they kind of nailed what they were trying to do, and the layout is really nice. Everything is very clear. It's not any kind of super fancy, but everything I felt like was laid out pretty clearly. Now, of course, I'm coming from a place where I read a ton of RPG materials, so maybe the lack of examples, because I think I only saw the one. There might have been a few more, but not very many examples, would be something that they would want more of. But I felt like everything was fairly clear. But again, I'm coming from a place of I know what I'm looking for, sort of thing. So maybe need more examples. I don't know. I think the book gives you pretty much everything you need. I don't think I feel like I need to go back and have the Black Hack and this if I just wanted to play this. I think I could just run everything with what's in this book, which I also appreciate. Yeah, I just think it's a really, really nice job. And this is the kind of fiction that's kind of right up my alley. So it appeals to me on many levels. And I think they kind of knocked that out of the park. I don't know. You folks can tell me in the chat if there's anything in here you felt like was amiss or running afoul. There might be some things that someone who's familiar with Black Hack, like that they don't seem to be using usage dice. I don't see that as a bad thing. I just think that's a choice they make. Someone may say, oh, they didn't use this or that, but I don't know. I think it really did everything that I think I could ask for. I didn't notice anything where going, oh, well, they need to have this or that or the other thing. And I think they've kind of got it all. It's certainly, I think if you're wanting to run, I'm going to keep using Lord of the Rings because I really see a lot of Lord of the Rings in here. I mean, it's called There and Hack again. And even though they bring in a lot of other references, I feel like the most clear lineage in this book is Lord of the Rings. And I think if you were looking at it, that maybe you liked the One Ring first or second edition, but it was too much, or you wanted something simpler, or you wanted something more OSR-ish a little bit, I think this is a really good alternative to that. If you saw that book and you thought for whatever reason you don't like that the way their systems work, whatever, I think this is a great spot to look at. So yeah, I was really happy to see this, and I'm only sorry that I only ran across it recently and haven't known about it for years or whenever it was published, which I'm not sure how old this is. Morgan says that sample play can be good, but it is often maybe overdone. Yep, I think it can be. I really like the examples, and I also like I like specific examples, and I like that example of play. But I think in the case of this one, again, if I was new to the hobby or new to this, maybe I'd feel more I need it. I didn't feel like there was anything super confusing that I read through that I needed it. Now I did sweep over a bunch of things, and maybe if I got more into the nitty gritty and I was reading it, then some of those details I might say, ooh, I think I need that. But I felt like for what I read, with all those caveats, is that I didn't feel like I needed the example to illuminate what was happening. But I'm just acknowledging that for players, readers, people, prospective GMs coming at this from a different place, some of those might be helpful. But really good, really, really good, excellent. Hope folks like it. There are links to it. You can pick it up on drive-through. I don't exactly know. I didn't check the price, but links to all that stuff are there. As usual, if you give a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here and you're not subscribed and you feel like subscribing, that would also be awesome. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on. I will talk to you later. Bye, everybody.